Let's talk about walking. Hello, good evening everyone. My name is Nicholas Corcel and you're watching The Literary Nomad. Recently I spent a week in the mountains of Sapa, Vietnam, just reading, thinking, and finishing up the first draft of my novel. And whenever I'm traveling to a new environment, I like to try to find pieces of literature that's relevant to the experiences that I'm having, and that brought me to an essay by Henry David Thoreau. I found a copy of his essay Walking on Project Gutenberg, and I spent a morning reading it outside. And although this isn't really material that I typically like to read, I found the essay very moving, and I think that Thoreau has a lot of interesting ideas that surprisingly still apply to modern society today. And so we begin the essay with a very intense and thorough breakdown of the word sauntering. And I think it's interesting that sauntering is the word that Thoreau prefers over walking, right? Because the essay is called Walking. I guess maybe it's just a marketing choice, I'm not sure. But we have these two different definitions of the word sauntering that he really hones in on. The first is à la Sainte Terre, which means to the Holy Land. So whenever we're walking, we are walking towards this goal of the Holy Land. The other is sans terre, which more or less means having no home. Thoreau, and myself included, prefer this second definition of the word. This idea of walking being sans terre, meaning you have no home, but rather everywhere is your home. The road is your home. I found that this second definition really resonated with me and where I am in my life right now, right? I've spent the last couple months living nomadically, trying to make it as a full-time writer, bouncing around different countries in Southeast Asia. I'm currently in Vietnam, traveling through all these different countries. And while I don't have a home in the traditional sense, the world is kind of becoming my adopted home, right? 1 week I'm in Hanoi Old Quarter, the next I'm in the mountains of Sapa, and 2 weeks later I'm on a beach here in Da Nang where I'm recording this video today. None of these places are my home, and I don't even know if I can say that I live here, but in a manner of speaking, it all is my home. And I'm beginning to feel more connected than I ever have before with the world around me, and I think that that's kind of the point of walking sans terre. Further in the essay, he talked about that you have to be willing to give up on everything in your life. You have to be able to get rid of all of the things that are maybe not holding you back, but all the things that you hold dearly to be able to walk effectively. Pulling from the essay directly, he writes, "Our expeditions are but tours, and come round again at evening to the old hearthside from which we set out. Half the walk is but retracing our steps. We should go forth on the shortest walk, perchance, in the spirit of undying adventure, never to return. Prepared to send back our embalmed hearts only as relics to our desolate kingdoms. If you are ready to leave father and mother and brother and sister and wife and child and friends and never see them again, if you have paid your debts and made your will and settled all your affairs and are a free man, then you are ready for a walk." And this line really stood out to me as I was traveling through these mountains and enjoying some of the greatest scenery that the world has to offer. This idea that you must be willing to get lost to be able to walk, right? You must not have an end goal. You must open yourself up to the infinite possibilities that the world around you has to offer in order to truly embrace this natural state of being which comes from walking. This unknown of what's around the next corner, of what's through that forest just on the horizon, or what's in that next country, is the point of walking. It's the point of living even. Through this, he believes that we can fulfill sort of our core function as men, right? We can become a part of nature as we were intended to be, rather than a member of an abstractly constructed society. And as such, if you achieve this, Thoreau believes that you are a member of the highest social class, regardless of the family you were born in or any of the other things that we love to prescribe social clout and value to in the modern world. Schoolwork, technology, stresses, anxiety, none of this extends to the endless prairies, mountains, and beaches of the natural world. In Thoreau's eyes, towns and cities remove us from who we really are. They serve no function other than meaningless distraction. And as a man goes through his life and ages, he becomes more willing to accept these things that pull him from his natural state. We lose our desire to fight back and to become one with the world around us, which was our intended function. He suggests that you go out in the middle of nowhere, get lost, and when you're in that wilderness, you're no longer in America, Vietnam, Spain, Portugal, but rather you're in the world as a whole. You're walking the paths carved by the greatest and the worst and the most average men of our time and every time before that. You're walking the paths of all the animals, of the herds, extinct and otherwise. You're walking through God's harshest disasters and greatest miracles. And this is where all of humanity comes together and this true idea of oneness appears. This discovery is man's core reason for being, or in the words of the French, this is our raison d'etre. Further in the essay, he talks about this idea that land shouldn't or can't be truly owned. And I think this was super interesting, right? It's something that I think we all have thought of and the governments have thought of as well, right? If they didn't, why would there be natural parks? It's odd, and I think all of us have had this thought. Of course, you can rationalize it through capitalist systems or governing, whatever. But the core idea that I can just give some paper to some guy and now these rocks are mine and I can give them to my kids who can give them to their kids. And 100 generations from now, my name owns this thing until some guy from a different country comes and kills my family. I think that whole idea is inherently absurd, and Thoreau is pointing that out, right? That these things can't be owned by anybody, but rather they're owned by everybody. Us people, the animals, the environment. It's all kind of a co-op, so to speak. And right in the middle of the essay, he drives this point home with one of the most powerful passages I've ever had the pleasure of reading. He says, "Life consists with wildness. The most alive is the wildest, not yet subdued to man. Its presence refreshes him. One who pressed forward insistently and never rested from his labors, who grew fast and made infinite demands on life, would always find himself in a new country or wilderness and surrounded by the raw material of life. He would be climbing over the prostrate stems of primitive forest trees." This idea just really hit home with me. It's a big reason as to why I hit the road and started living nomadically. I've never read this essay before, but it was one of those pieces that as you read it, you're like, oh, I've thought that before. And that's why it stood the test of time, right? Great writing taps into truths both old and undiscovered. And he just continues to just bulldoze through society throughout this essay. He pushes back against everything that we take for granted in a way that reminded me a lot of Michel Foucault, where you question and doubt everything that we view as normal. And he makes a very compelling argument against something as simple as just having a name. He questions the significance of naming and questions if it serves a purpose whatsoever, suggesting that perhaps just a broad label of what race or species you're a part of would be more useful. He builds on this, saying that any further description should be given as a nickname for the things that you do or the person that you are, rather than just some arbitrary label. And this push against the arbitrary nature of our society, I think, is very fascinating and persists as a through line throughout the entirety of the essay. And I think the best way to finish is with Thoreau's words himself, saying, "All good things are wild and free." Think about this as you go through your life and make decisions with where you spend your time or the things that you spend doing. I'm not suggesting that you go and quit your job and live in the wilderness, but I am suggesting that you think about why you are doing the things that you're doing. Why are you going to the office? Do you have to? Are there alternative routes to the life that you're living? In my personal life, I turned down a job that most people view as perfect, right? Near six figures right out of college. And I turned all that down for what? To live out of a backpack, make a couple $1,000s a month writing? That may sound absurd, but when you question, why are you doing it? What do I want? Do I want a $4,000 to $5,000 a month mortgage in a city that I don't like? Or do I want to walk? Do I want to see these beautiful things in the world? Do I want to live? What is my reason for being? Think about this and let that govern your decisions.